We discussed yesterday Trump's public statements about his conversations with Putin, with Zelensky, and we tried to derive some meaning from those as to what's going on with the discussions about Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Now, I want to look at some really interesting interview moments where Zelensky at the Munich Security Conference reveals details about his meeting with Trump and his feelings about Trump's meeting with Putin. A lot of fascinating stuff there. Before getting to those clips, though, I do want to respond to something that Trump said that I missed. And it has to do with him being afraid, I guess, to just admit, yeah, Putin is the one who's to blame for this war. Okay? So here's the clip, and I'll tell you why this is so important.
To Ukraine as well. Yesterday you mentioned that you thought...
By the way, if you appreciate this show and you haven't yet subscribed, please do click that subscribe button.
Ukraine's NATO aspirations were one of the main reasons that the war broke out. Who do you blame for the war, Ukraine or Russia?
Well, I think that there were a lot of people to blame. All I can say is very simply, if I were president, that war would never...
Yeah, he only has one hammer. So he's just hitting everything like it's a nail. It wouldn't have happened. It wouldn't have happened. We addressed that a bunch of times. But this is a really harmful characteristic, especially going into negotiations. I have a little bit of doubt that Putin's actually negotiating in the way that Trump acts like he is, but we'll address that later on in this segment. But you have to understand that while it's looking like to figure out a path to peace, it's not going to end up being what's fair, because what's fair would be Russia just stops invading. They're the ones continuing this every single day. They could just withdraw the troops. It's over. Peace, right? That would be fair. That would be justice. But that may not be pragmatic. And so maybe Ukraine ends up making concessions. And as that process goes on, it can't get lost that there is one side to blame here, and it's Russia. The complexities of a lasting peace deal are complex, fair. But that doesn't mean we start talking in terms that make it seem like, which is what MAGA has totally bought into, there's just some hard to define conflict that's there, but it's just lasting because both sides want it to continue. That's not at all what's taking place. Okay, so with that context in mind, let's walk through a few different clips, starting with this one and him saying he's not happy with the way that Trump handled the call with Putin and then him.
I think that is good that, first of all, we have to make a plan with you, I said to the president. It was the day when he had phone calls with Putin and with me, and first with him and then with us.
And how did that sit with you?
No, I said that...
But first with Putin and then with you?
Oh, I'm not happy. Yes, but I think that more dangerous if first meeting will be with Putin and then with Ukraine. And there are things I shared with the President Trump, that first of all, we have to see common view. And I said also that at the table, we need Europe also. It's very important for us. We are Europe. We in Europe, and we see our future only in EU, like a member. So that's why for us it's very important. And Europe helped us a lot, because when I speak really,
Yeah, and so one of the things that was upsetting, he has to walk a fine line, Zelensky that is, though, because he can't, for lack of a better phrase, piss off Trump, because Trump does have a lot of power, and literally for the survival of Ukraine, he needs to make sure that Trump doesn't cut off support, right? That's a lot. And we all know one of the main ways you keep Trump happy with you is you don't talk, mean about him, and you compliment him a lot. One just awkward detail we'll get to a little bit later is about Zelensky having to tell Trump to him how strong he is and all these things. But again, that's for a little bit later. But he also has to be honest that he's not happy. So that's why you'll notice he kind of has to be careful with what he says. He's not happy that Trump is doing this weird thing where he's going to go meet with Putin at a summit, excluding so many necessary voices, as if they could come up with a plan and they just go, all right, this is the plan, Ukraine, without Ukraine's participation, but then just notifying Zelensky about what's going on. Zelensky has a problem with that. I think it's understandable for him to have that. Here's another clip.
You, after your phone call with President Trump, said that you did not hear enough detail to make this a peace plan. Can you just elaborate what you meant by that?
Can I speak Ukrainian?
No.
Okay. Don't pressure on me. Okay, so yeah, we had really a long conversation with the President of the United States. Not first one and not last, I'm sure. And I mean, really between us, I'm not sure that by phone we can manage all the plan, all security guarantees with all the details, because, you know, devil in details. Yes, and we know where is this devil, in what country now. Yes, that's why we have to stop him, to stop Putin, and it's very important for me. That's why the atmosphere of our discussion is good, but really it's always good. Yes. But we need urgent, very concrete steps. And I think we have to work on it. Our teams, well, we began, but I think that we have to start immediately to do more deep decisions.
Yeah. So a lot of times the way that Trump talks about this, the way that some of his supporters do, I've said it before, but it's, well, we need peace. We need peace. And that it's simple, it sounds nice. Yeah, let's just do the option that's peace. But the devil really is in the details, because you could actually end up facilitating much more bloodshed, more harm by doing what I think Trump really wants to do, which is get his peace deal, temporarily halt, but hand over a bunch of stuff to Putin, territory, commitment that Ukraine will go in NATO, etc. But if you have any understanding or care about the long term, you understand that you could actually help Putin a lot, pause, replenish, recoup, and then continue the aggression, as he's done before with violating agreements. So we know he's willing to violate agreements. That's kind of his thing, as I said in a different segment. And so you can't just get, for the sake of a temporary, Trump is the peace man, PR stunt, something that in its real protections for future peace, long-standing peace, is meaningless, right? And so that's why it's so important, the details of how do you enforce security guarantees? Who's responsible for that? What happens in the case that Russia violates the agreement, continues the aggression? How do you actually make it lasting peace and not just a timeout for Russia to catch its breath? Here's more.
So you talk about losses, obviously heavy losses. You mentioned Russia's heavy losses as well. Yeah. You were talking to President Trump, and you know that last year, around this time last year, it was President Trump and his allies in Congress which delayed for approximately 7 months the aid that was meant to come to Ukraine. When I spoke to General Zelensky, your commander in Ukraine, just a few months ago, he said the delay in aid did cost lives, cost territory, and cost a lot of strategic effort in Ukraine. Did you mention that to President Trump?
No.
I see.
We spoke about delaying and about decision of the Congress, and at least positive decision. I was thankful to him. It was in September when we had meeting during his election period. I think so, or before the election period. I don't. Before, a little bit before. Yes. So it was very important, the decision. I was thankful bipartisan support and also Mike Johnson. He made positive decision.
Okay, so that is what I was talking about with. He was absolutely livid that Republicans cost Ukraine so much by delaying one of the packages of aid over, oh my gosh, if you remember this, it nearly cost me my brain because I almost just reached in and ripped it out, threw it on the ground, stepped on it because I didn't want to think about this anymore. This was the situation. For some of our younger viewers who weren't around, year ago or half a year ago, where Republicans said, we won't do any more aid to Ukraine until we get a border deal. Okay. So we won't do till we get border deal. All right. So then Democrats work with a conservative Republican to craft, and they'd already been working on it, this comprehensive border security bill. Everything Republicans would want. And then Republicans go, wait, that would give Biden a political win. No, we're going to shoot down the border deal, but we won't do aid unless we get the border secured. But you're the one blocking the... Watching that from afar as his country is suffering, desperately needing the aid, you know Zelensky was absolutely livid. Understandably so. But he can't say that because he can't alienate the very people they have the majority in Congress, in both the House and the Senate. Trump's the one in the White House. He has to stay in their good graces if he's going to continue getting some level of support. And so he has to walk that fine line, which segues us into this. Axios reports that Zelensky told Trump during a phone call that Putin is, and I'll show you the clip of Zelensky saying this, but first, that Putin's afraid of him. Now, as we go through these quotes, in a general sense, every world leader is afraid of the U.S. president. You know, in a general, the U.S. president's powerful regardless of who it is and has a lot of leverage because of that power. But the way he said it to Trump is so obviously him having to kiss Trump's rear end a little bit, but strategically. I get why he has to do it so that Trump will be supportive of him. Because the only reason every time Trump gets asked about supporting Ukraine that Trump says he's on board in some sense is because he likes Zelensky, because Zelensky, it's a longer story, but essentially was nice to him. So Zelensky has to sort of play this game again, understandably. And one of the quotes that just was Putin told you he wants a deal only because he's afraid of you, because you are strong. But I do think that's how you're going to keep Trump in your good graces, which Zelensky needs to. For the future of Ukraine, he needs the U.S. president on board. And right now, Trump is way too on board with trying to facilitate a deal that's very advantageous to Putin. Here's Zelensky saying this.
Did you tell, as was reported, President Trump, that Putin is only doing this and agreeing to talks because he's afraid of Trump? Did you tell him that?
Yes. I told Trump that Putin afraid of him. Yes, and he heard me. And now Putin knows.
I shouldn't be laughing, but you do make me smile. So,
we
Mr.
want
President,
peace.
thank you very much.
We have to live and we have to smile.
That's
when we
true
have
too.
time,
That
of
is
course.
true.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that's a point that I've been making recently, which is in times of darkness, if what it is that we're fighting for every day, the policies we care about, what we advocate, is ultimately because we want people to be happier, we want people to experience the joys of life, we want to enhance that for people. And so if in the process of fighting for that, we don't try to experience the joys of life still, then there's a little bit of a contradiction there. So I encourage all of you, amid all these stressful stories, to try your best to still experience joy. An interesting little note there. But yeah, again, it is true that the U.S. president is feared, whoever it is, given the power. But him specifically saying, you can even tell in the way he read that back, you're so strong. He's afraid of you. Well, what is he trying to convey with that in terms that Trump likes to hear? Well, he's trying to convey that, Trump, you have to be more skeptical. It's not that there shouldn't be engagements. We shouldn't have talks. It seems Zelensky's totally wanting to do that. But when Trump, I went over these clips already, but when he gets asked about his trust level for Putin, he said something like, well, I don't know why Putin would tell me that he wants peace if he didn't. You can't think of one scenario where he would be disingenuous to you? The guy who, when someone speaks out against him, they mysteriously trip, stab themselves a bunch of times, and then fall out of a window? That guy is going to be the epitome of honesty? You can't think of one hypothetical where he's saying that to you because he thinks he could play you like a fiddle? But again, if you say it that way, Trump's cutting off aid and he's, I don't know, getting the nukes ready against Ukraine or something. So he has to say, maybe he's saying that to you because he thinks that something on your body is so big, so huge. And, right. And I do think that's a smart play. My computer just turned off as I have another clip to show you all. But it's important that someone explains to Trump that there's a really good chance, and this is what I referenced earlier, that Trump and Putin could both sort of get a win out of this, which is Trump could get on paper a peace deal and go, I'm the peacemaker. Putin could get huge concessions, like what Hegseth, without even entering in any negotiations, just said, yeah, NATO's off the table completely. We'll take it off for you before we even negotiate. What? But they could get, Putin could get those concessions. He could get territory just handed to him because he took it forcefully. And then Ukraine could get no real meaningful guarantees that this won't continue 3 seconds later. And then Putin would continue it months or years in the future. But Trump gets his win and Putin gets his win. But Ukraine doesn't. Ukraine, the country that's actually being victimized here, doesn't. And that's my fear. And so to answer Trump's question of why would he tell me that if he didn't mean it, that's why. The NATO Secretary General, by the way, said this.
You will admit that already President Trump has telegraphed to him as he sits in his Kremlin armchair that he agrees with Putin's position on Ukraine never joining NATO. This is something that NATO promised Ukraine at your last summit in Washington, that its future was in NATO. Is that off the table?
President Trump, when he was campaigning, also had some clear statements on the same issue, so you cannot be too surprised. Mm-hmm. And as you said, indeed today there was a clear statement from the White House and others that all options are on the table, and I am just pleading for a situation where we try to really make that part of the negotiations, whatever will happen. And
yeah, I mean, this is all so tragic, but obviously, right? He's saying, if you missed it, he's saying, I'm pleading. I'm not surprised that MAGA has this sort of less pro-Ukrainian stance, because it's been there for a while. But I'm pleading, can they please not give away key parts of what would become a part of the negotiation before we start? Something that shouldn't be so obvious. Well, obviously, we'll say they can never be in NATO. Wait, why does Russia through force get to dictate which military alliances Ukraine's in? Wait, why do I care that Putin gets grumpy when Ukraine wants to be a part of the sort of the Western world? He wants to benefit from the European, or Ukraine wants to benefit from the European economy. Why is that justification for a brutal invasion? So it's, I understand, true that at some point things won't be fully justice, but we might have to make concessions to get peace. But why are we giving away huge, consequential, precedent-setting things that are totally morally wrong? Even if you think we should go there, it's totally not acceptable. It's not reasonable that we'd have to do that. And sometimes the world's not reasonable, but you're doing that before the negotiation even starts? So he said, I'm pleading. I'm not even saying that we won't end up maybe making some of these concessions, but why are you saying that beforehand? Very reasonable thing to say there. Share your thoughts in the comments. Support the show. Get the members only bonus show by clicking that join button below.